Welcome to the Beaver Hacks podcast. I'm your host, Havel Konda, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking to one of the officers of one of the largest clubs at OSU, ACM, which stands for Advanced Computing Machinery. He's a former intern at Uber, and he's a current junior at Oregon State University. Thanks for coming on the show, Peter Mora-Stevens.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited. Looking forward to this.
I'll just adjust this real quick. So, for our listeners on KBVR FM, this is our first episode inside this studio. And for our fans of Hackathon Club, this is our first time in here. So we're kind of testing out the waters, looking at all the cool lights we have in here and kind of figuring things out. Yeah, I think we should be good to go, but I'll just get right into the conversation. Peter, last night we had a pretty exciting night. ACM, Advanced Computing Machinery, the club that you're a part of, had one of their biggest nights ever. I think we had the internship talk, and we had over 115 OSU students come to this talk. Definitely a very successful night. You did a great job speaking about it. I had a really good time. I was in the audience as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you shared last night and how that went for you?
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed being able to talk about, advice, hopefully helping students prepare for interviews and just understand what even is going to happen when they try and get a job. But yeah, like you said, it was huge. We, had more people than I was ever expecting. So really enjoyed that experience. Through the internship presentation, we covered, the entire interview process from front to end. What happens, when you apply to a job, what happens when you're getting, tested for the job using an online assessment. Telling people even what that is. I'm sure there's, 20, 30 people in that room who didn't even know what that word meant before the presentation. Talking about behavioral interviews and technical interviews, and then, talking about how to prepare for them. It was a really fun night and kind of like a culmination, it felt like, of all the time I spent learning this stuff on my own, being able to give that back and help students prepare for themselves. It was really fun.
So I think you covered a lot of different topics. Most of them were, of course, the interview. I really liked the flowchart you had with the different pipeline and how you can kind of secure that. You want to talk a little bit about that flowchart and just the basic, structure of how this process works of getting internships.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because, we were talking a little bit ago about Steven. Steven's actually the one who told me to use that on every transition slide. I had one picture on the very beginning where you saw where the original one was. It was just the small image on the page, but he said he really liked how it showed each of the steps going down the internship, pipeline. But just to give you a visual representation or a verbal representation of it, it looks like kind of a cone or a filter, and then it breaks down each of the steps into 4 different subcategories. So there's the initial application where you talk about, your resume and how to make it impactful to a recruiter, someone who can really only take 20 seconds to really understand who you are, make you stand out. Then you kind of move on, like I said, to the online application or the online assessment where you're basically using your coding skills to give yourself a chance at getting an interview. And we all know, OSU students are very capable. They're going to make it past that. So talking about when they make it past that, how they're going to prepare for the technical interview, the skills that they need to, communicate their entire thought process throughout the coding question. And then at the end, when they, use their communication skills to pass the behavioral interview, how they can tell what their evaluation is by their interviewer, and then eventually, like I said, get that 6-figure salary.
Yes, sir. I know you talked about how the entire process works, but do you want to discuss maybe how you can even get the interview in the first place, how you can prepare yourself and get that resume up to scale and up to par?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so there's a lot of things, people say, and I can only speak for myself, but I think the number one most helpful thing that's improved my resume has been my projects and any extracurriculars that I put on. for example, being an officer of a club is really helpful. So anyone who's interested in being part of a community and showing their interest in computer science outside of the classroom, that's going to be a great way for you to authentically show yourself to an interviewer or recruiter. You're not just putting the name down on your resume because you think it looks good. You're putting it down and you're doing the work because you love the community, and that's really what's important, is being excited about computer science, being excited about meeting students who love this technology. The other thing is the bullet points. Obviously, like I talked a lot about this, like the XYZ format. It's more about your communication of why what you're doing is important. Number one thing recruiters are going to tell you when you do a resume review is why did you do it? Why did you put that item on your resume? Why does that matter? And I said this in the talk, and I'll say it again. It's not a statement of like, why are you special? And like, trying to say you're not. It's more of a statement of, you are special. How can you show me that? And so we really want to see what separates you from every other student in the United States, what separates you from another computer science student. And so that XYZ method is, doing something, which is X, with a measurement of Y. So like using a decimal or like a percentage, I mean to say, and then why it matters. So like, I think I gave an example is like, I increased user retention rate by like 56% on your homepage by implementing a widget with React.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, those are things that you can really do to improve your resume.
100%. Yeah. Going back to the first point you made on, the club leadership, I think you talked about how, it makes a difference on how, if you're someone who's just putting it on there for the name of it versus someone who's actually trying to better the community. Do you think there's a big difference between someone who actually cares about the community, like you, for example, where you're actually interested in helping these students grow as people, whereas there's certain officers who may just throw it on there for the sake of their resume and not really do much with that?
And I it's actually kind of funny because, at least from my perspective, like how I see a lot of us, like, and we kind of had this conversation earlier, like a lot of people at OSU who are officers because they care. Like OSU is in a unique position where, I can shout at other universities, like unlike, UC Berkeley, where you would have to sign up to interview for a club, OSU is in a position where everyone's welcome. You can come to a club and enjoy what it has to offer no matter what. And I think the officers kind of play a role in that as well, in making it like a welcoming community. And personally, in my case, like I've never seen an officer who has like putting something down on their resume and then said like they did something and they didn't. I have, not to spill some tea, but I have seen someone who wrote down that they were an officer of ACM. They were not an officer of ACM, and they gave their resume to Intel, and we caught them. Yeah, it's kind of crazy tea, but safe to say, if you're putting that down and you're like saying that, like I think if you're doing something like that, then there is a big difference. If you're an officer who is putting the time, the effort into making events, and you're someone who says, I'm going to pretend to do that and be that, it's like you're almost taking advantage of the time and charity of the people who are running these clubs, because obviously none of them get paid in any way. Like it's about self-satisfaction and about helping others. That is really important. And like many people who aren't officers don't know how much time it takes to plan events, like how many iterations you have to go through to build a project or like a event that is really satisfying to you, but also to someone who is there to consume or like to see the event. So I think that if you're someone who is in an officer position and you feel that excitement, you really care. So maybe I went a little off topic there, but I think
that was perfect. Yeah, I noticed how when I walked into ACM, not just this last event, but like last week too, I just saw like the sheer number of people and the vibrant community. There's so many faces that I had never seen before. And I was like, the fact that they made this happen, is insane. And then I went up to Steven and I was like, tell me what you guys did. Like, what's all this about? And he's like, man, like, Peter and of course a couple others, because the ACM team is very, very diligent, hardworking. They really care about this community. I really feel like you guys are kind of the core of the community. Like, we always meet every Thursday. You see all those like familiar faces. You guys went into like the general engineering classes and you just went in and just promoted the club. You told every freshman, like, hey, if you're a CS student and you're looking to find out how to succeed, this is where you want to be. And you put in the work, you put in the effort. And then, of course, we see the benefits where there's like hundreds of people showing up to these meetings and they're ready to learn and they're ready to grow.
It's super exciting. I love that. And, obviously huge shout outs to Steven. I think Steven is probably like the main spearhead of that. He's probably one of the hardest working people for like the club that I know. Something I should mention too is like, I think like huge shout out to all the officers of ACM. One of the biggest changes I think we made in this last year that I noticed that made the biggest difference is expanding our officer team. We have 7 new officers compared to 5 last year. Within 1 week of last year trying to make 2 meetings, we were too burnt out. We had too much responsibility for each of us to plan something. And I love it this year because every person is pulling their weight very clearly. And even if, someone needs to take some time to do, personal things, they're always, able to move in at that next time we do an event. So, maybe I plan something this week, but next week it's Carson. And then the week after that it's Mac. And the week after that it's Steven. So, you're seeing a huge change in how, like, we're able to plan things out really far into the future, always keeping new ideas rolling. People, like new students are always going to be interested in what's going on because we're not throwing together an event last minute, which was an issue last year, but this year is going really well. So I'm super excited to see it keep coming like that.
Yeah, I mean, just to plug some of your stuff that you guys are doing, like last week I pulled up to the meeting and you guys had, I'm just going to announce some of these ideas, but like the new initiatives, right? So like you guys have this thing called ACM office hours. And I know I see in the Discord, like Steven will just say, everyone, like I'm free for the next 2 hours, and you guys come in and like you help people and you just answer any questions that they have. Very useful stuff. It really makes it feel like less of a club and more of a resource, And then of course you have the mock interviews. You want to talk a little bit about that and maybe add on to what I said about the office hours as well.
Of course, yeah. I'm super excited about them. Like, it's nice too because this year they've been used a lot more than last year, especially since we've kind of gotten into more of a rhythm with the officers. But yeah, so well, I can mention ACM office hours first. Steven was really adamant about being a person who the freshman, second year, even third year students who need support in anything, MECOP, classes, which applied option to choose. He wants to be there. He wants to be someone who is a friendly face that someone can look at and go, I trust this guy to help me, with whatever I want to talk about. So he's super, super kind. You know him. Obviously, we all know how kind he is. And it's one of those things where I think those are going to be really interesting to see how they evolve. We're only here for 4 years or 5 years, however long. And I sincerely wonder in, a blink of an eye what's going to happen to them in the future because I really hope they continue. As for the mock interviews, they kind of came as a evolution of last year's mock interviews that I held. I recently just kind of revitalized them. After my experience this last summer and my time at Uber, my time interviewing for new internship positions, I realized just a lot more about the interview cycle and process. I have a lot more resources now. Like, I can find better questions to ask people. I have much more behavioral skills, like behavioral questions in my question bank task. So all of those things have been really, really helpful. And now people seem to be really excited about using them. I think we've already hit like 7 people who are already interested in that. And when you think about how many people showed up to ACM 115, you're already getting like a little bit less than 10% of those people interested in your mock interviews. It's really nice to be able to support people. Even if they're not getting interviews, they just want to be prepared for them.
One thing I want to touch on is, the comparison of what you learn in school versus what you will learn outside of your classes. So I think in past podcast interviews, we talked about how projects are crucial, projects are important, but what's your take on, the stuff you learn in class versus the stuff that you're learning in clubs, possibly, or from upperclassmen, or just stuff on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about like my internship experience. That everything you learn in school is great. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't learn anything, but when you get a job and you're working in industry, you realize just how much of it like you don't use in your job. Obviously, like if you learn about databases, you might use databases. If you're learning about like what a for loop is, you're probably going to use a for loop. You're probably going to use data structures. But there's a lot of classes out there that are a little bit more theoretical that you might not apply as much. And obviously they round out your education, but you go to a company and you're thrown into this like software, this code base, and you have no idea what's going on. The level of complexity is so much higher than what they teach you at school. And like you said, like, I think the statement for me is just, you don't know what you don't know. So, and this is just advice I give to people who might be coming into an internship. I think I told Carson this, or at least I will tell Carson this. It's, you're gonna feel overwhelmed. And I mean, that's inevitable in any situation that you're thrown into that you don't know what's going on, and that's okay. It's expected. The statement can't be overstated that an internship is a race, right? It's a sprint, not a marathon, where a full-time job is a marathon. Your internship is about trying to deliver results as fast as you can in 12 weeks. And your full-time job is about really understanding everything and trying to be as thorough as possible. So with internships, it's going to be stressful. You're going to really be like, out of your mind trying to understand everything. But people know that because they've gone through that experience. Having done that my first time, I didn't realize how many other people understood that feeling until I talked to them, especially at Uber, and they, most of them who were interns themselves, talked about how stressful it was for them. So everyone there cares about you, or at least, cares about understanding you. And if you talk about your experiences and, communicate how you're feeling, people are going to be supportive. And so I think that's the best resource I took advantage of, was telling my coworkers, telling my friends how I felt. Everyone who's been through that knows, and so they can support you, they can give you advice. But yes, you don't learn everything in school for sure.
For sure, yeah. One thing we were talking about earlier was how, I think we'll touch on, like, this is a part of like the interview process, but online assessments. We were talking a little bit about how sometimes it can feel like, the target schools are the ones who are just going to get those internships, but online assessments could be equalizers in the equation. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, and I mentioned this like during the talk, and I maybe I say this before, maybe controversial statement, but I think that online assessments are going to be, and they are used as a way to, at least on some level, on the general case, more equalize how students are able to interview at big tech. And the reason why is because, like you said, if you're only recruiting from places that recruiters go in person and interview on campus, we would never be there. Oregon State students would never be at those universities doing those interviews, just due to the fact that we're in Corvallis, unfortunately, and no one's going to fly in here. But because we can do online assessments, because we can practice those coding questions and pass those interview like pre-screenings, we're suddenly going to be able to, find ourselves in interviews. We're able to move forward in the interview process and actually, do more than we thought we could. I say that personally just because, I've done however many, OAs, and even if I fail one or two, it doesn't mean it's over. I can do, a few more screenings, and then the next thing I know, I'm in a few more interview cycles. And sure, it takes a lot of work, and I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's going to be the best way for you to get an interview. Even if you're in an Ivy League school, you still have to pass those. So just because you're at an Ivy League school, it doesn't mean you're going to implicitly get a job just because you're there. You also have to do them as well. So it's kind of giving us a little bit more of an even ground, where instead of having to fight against them, we're all trying to reach that endpoint as well. Maybe that's a little bit maybe it's not as good because we're all running towards that end goal, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. On the topic of that, Ivy League schools, and I think another kind of idea of how these internships work, when you were working or getting into the Uber environment from your internship there, I think you assumed that, okay, I'm going to be working with a lot of high-level people from these target schools. But that wasn't necessarily the case. You were meeting people from all kinds of different backgrounds. How do you feel like the internship environments kind of vary in terms of our expectations on them?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure, like, you definitely have a large, maybe you have a decent size of class from Stanford and Harvard and places, MIT, like that. But recently, especially with the rise of online assessments, you see a lot more students from state schools and even community colleges for some programs showing up. For example, like for me, I don't think that there are too many Oregon State students who intern at Uber, at least recently. But I know that aside from me, one other PhD student was there. But like I said, I met students at community colleges like Coastal College, which is a community college in California, San Jose State, which is it's a target school only because it's in the Bay, but it's not considered like an Ivy League. I met students who were at universities in Michigan, not University of Michigan either, so it's not like the target school for CS. There's a ton of different people there who you get to meet, and at least in my experience, every single person has a very strong drive to prove themselves, to do well at their job, but also they're all very kind people. And I think that's something you kind of notice when you're interning, that pretty much anyone who made it through the interview process had to have some social communication skills. And by doing that, they're, already going to be generally pretty well spoken, pretty well articulated, and they're all just very kind people. So I really appreciated that experience. Everyone I met this summer, I had a great time, and they were really friendly. So if there's one thing I'd recommend about internships, it's get to know your fellow interns.
For sure. So, yeah, I think one other aspect of internships, and, you're interviewing now for other companies. Do you want to talk about just vaguely whatever you want to share, but where you're interviewing, what your plans are moving forward?
Sure, yeah. Honestly, and this is kind of something I'll touch on that maybe other people can take into consideration. I'm in two processes right now, actively, and I kind of had stuff earlier in the summer that I've kept and some that I haven't. And so some things that I've thought about, I guess I can talk about it. It's fine. I'm interviewing with Netflix for hopefully final round. We'll see if I passed, but I feel confident in that. And then next Tuesday I have Microsoft final round. And so between those, a lot of people kind of have thoughts about which is better and all that stuff. If you're ever in the position in the future where you have choices to make, I think something that I learned from my perspective at Uber was that your decisions about what you take and about what you accept for your internship, job, whatever, only you can really answer the questions of what you want. And I say that because every person is going to have an opinion about what offer you should take or what job you should take. If you are in a position where you have choices to make and you know have the opportunity to pick two things, I think you should stick with what your gut is telling you, because at least for a lot of these companies, there are trade-offs to picking one offer over another. If you're looking at your company, even if you just have one offer, if you're looking at your company that gave you an offer and you're looking at maybe what the work-life balance is going to be like, what the culture is going to be, all of these things that you should look at before you decide. I think, at least in my case, like, those are things that matter to me, like work-life balance. But at least for interviewing and everything, that kind of helped give me more to talk about for my presentation. So definitely, like, the communication is very important to study on.
So I think on the note of work-life balance and kind of letting that be a factor into where you go, I guess it would be on the other side, you got like companies that make you work very rigorously. I think we know that Netflix and Amazon, companies like that, have a tendency to kind of push their interns to a higher level. And then on the flip side, there might be other companies that kind of help you have a more relaxed work-life balance. And then, of course, there's location. How do you feel like students should kind of navigate that kind of terrain and make those decisions?
Yeah, at least for me, like, and it's like, me saying this is going to be funny because I am terrible at listening to my own advice, but you should listen, like I said, you should listen to what you truly want, because you know yourself the best. You could ask 100 people and you could get 100 different answers about which option you should pick, and maybe the 100 of them pick one thing, but they all pick it because of a reason you don't agree with. There's, at the end of the day, and this is just my take on it, having an offer is better than not having an offer. So if you pick something that other people might not agree with, it's not their choice, right? It's yours. So I think my advice for people to pick and think about what matters to them is really like where you see yourself, how you see yourself working. Like, yeah, we talked about Amazon, the joke being that you work incredibly grueling hours. If that's not something that necessarily appeals to you and you have another option, seriously consider like how you would see your life doing that other option. For me, like I mentioned, I prefer like the location of Seattle and stuff like that. That plays a lot into it. But as I start to kind of look at my different choices, I'm reconsidering things. I constantly feel like I'm changing my mind, but that's okay, right? You have plenty of time to decide. So when it comes to a lot of those decisions, you know yourself the best. So you can definitely ask people for advice. You can say, I would love to hear what your input is, but you shouldn't, at least I don't think you should let other people dictate what options you choose. Even if they tell you, it's obvious, this is why I would pick it. The option should truly come from you, or like the pick should only come from you. And you can tell that because, in your heart, you're gonna feel what you really want. At least for me, I feel that way.
No, I totally agree. Do you think a lot of times people let other people's advice kind of trump their own, and kind of let other people's perspective on things kind of go, they still agree with something that other people say even though it goes against what they want in their heart?
I'm sure, yeah. I mean, even myself, I let that happen sometimes, I think, you can definitely reconsider thoughts. You can reconsider, opinions based on other people's input, and maybe, someone thought of something that you hadn't. And that's definitely happened for me. Like, I originally thought I was only going to go to Seattle, but I maybe reconsidered, maybe if I pick a different option, I can, find another, I can improve my career in the short term or something. But I think there's a lot of what you could call, like, I'll dub it like prestige guilt. This idea that, like, you give up a better opportunity from a standpoint of name and brand recognition and possibly even pay. And you give all of that up because you know yourself well enough to pick something that really matters to you, which could be location, or it could be like, it could be remote work, it could be whatever. So I think, like, if you have something that really matters to you and, like, you're not going to give it up and you get the opportunity for it and you're saying that this is, to me, more valuable monetarily, more valuable emotionally towards my mental health than making a little bit of extra money and maybe having a little bit better name on your resume, I think it's 100% worth it to stick to your original feelings. But I definitely think it can be easy to get swayed because someone might tell you that you're giving up something better to them, right? Because they would definitely take it if they wanted it. And that's okay. People definitely can have their opinions on what they want. But I would try and remind myself of what matters to me before someone else. I think pro and cons list can really help with that because when you think in your mind, you kind of can sway yourself accidentally. But when you write it all out, you can very clearly see what matters to you. When you can write a whole list of pros and then, some cons, quite a lot of cons for something, you probably know what you want, you just haven't found it yet.
How do you think people can take that idea of something that I want, something that I want to do, and something that I want to strive towards, and turn that into, like, a practical, tangible, like, put that into practice, A lot of times, I think almost everyone can agree, hey, like, getting that FANG internship is something that I want. Like, I want it more than anything, but when it comes to actually putting in the hours and grinding for it, that part can get a little more complicated.
100%. Yeah. I mean, and that's the funny thing, right? Like, yesterday I said, like, the only 2 steps you need to get an internship are get the interview and pass the interview. And that really holds true for grinding out that stuff. I hate the word grinding because it kind of sounds like you're rubbing something down until you finally get to this, like, final layer where you pass the interview. But in some ways, like, I want to reframe it in, like, you have a very finite level of steps you need to do before you're able to pass it. But between you and, like, $200,000, $100,000 is a subset of studyable, actionable items, right? So putting that to action, like I told people, doing leak code, and I know people hate leak code, the idea of it. And, I tell people how many leak code questions I do. I've done, like, 580. You don't have to do, like, 580. You can do 100. You could do 200, That's still a lot, but it's much more reasonable and actionable than like 600. Between you and that offer is this finite, set of values, and if you do these, you suddenly have cleared a path for your, financial future. I kind of sound like I'm scamming you by saying that, but I'm telling you, it really is just these questions are the things between. I will say, like, obviously there are opportunities out there that are, behavioral. If you're not interested in doing technical interviews, like, there are opportunities out there where you don't have to. And so if that's the thing that's stopping you, then, maybe you can find something there. But for, like, the FANG and for those offers and stuff, those are the, putting that to action is the main step to getting the interview or getting, like, the offer. I am obviously in the lucky percentage who enjoy leak code, possibly because, like, through practicing it, like, I eventually grew to like it because I guess the statement could be said that when you get good at something, you enjoy it. You could think about that as, like, exercising. Like, at the beginning of exercising, people probably hate it. The act of running is tiring and you feel gross from sweating and all that. But by like the 5th week, by the 10th week of doing it consistently, it's become a habit. It suddenly becomes something that you enjoy doing, right? Not saying like you have to work out and do lead code at the same time. If you're a CS major, maybe that's too much, but it's the same idea. It's ingraining your understanding that I can get good at this, and by getting good at this, I'll enjoy it. And it kind of becomes a self-repeating cycle of being able to reach that final goal of getting that internship or getting that full-time offer.
100%. I mean, those are some, I love that analogy of, comparing running to that grind, and I think you said it perfectly. I'm going to throw it back to yesterday with a little story. So we just got out of your talk, me and Caleb and Steven, we were heading to another place we had to go to, and Steven was telling us about the time you guys met. So for everyone who's listening, I am a current sophomore, and Peter is a junior. Steven is the president of ACM, and he's a senior. So at the time, I think you were a freshman, and he was a sophomore. Mm-hmm. You guys walked into your very first ACM meeting. You guys are totally new. And then Otso, he was the current president at the time, and he had the leak code problem up on the board. And the two of you sit next to each other, and you start doing the leak code problem. And essentially what happened is you came up with an answer, and Steven came up with a different answer. And you two were each so confident in each of your answers that you were just, like, no one could convince you otherwise. And then what ended up happening is Steven was correct, and you were so terribly wrong. And Steven was like, look at this guy. I mean, like, he doesn't know what he's thinking. He doesn't know what he's doing. And, Steven was telling me that last night, and he said, in the following weeks and months and even years, he would see you every day at Kelly Engineering Center grinding out leak code problems. And now look at Peter. He's like 580 leak code questions. It's become like a, it's become muscle memory for you.
Ask me that question again, Steven. No. I appreciate it. I mean, and it's fun because, like, Steven, it is really interesting to think about Steven being president of ACM now, because, like, also being president for 2 years, seeing him grow into, who he is now and being at SpaceX, which is crazy. But then, like, talking to Steven, seeing him from where he was at. I mean, because I talk about, like, my change and stuff, and I appreciate it. Steven, thank you for acknowledging the change. But it's so cool to see Steven as well, like, going from being ACM, treasurer until he did a lot of work, and then to now being such a strong leader for the club. And I mentioned it earlier as well, but I think he's probably one of the biggest impacts on this group. So I think it's really exciting to see what we'll end up continuing to do. But yeah, no, that leak code question, we talked about it earlier, and it's starting to come back more to me. I think I had to do something with spelling apples or something, and I definitely remember not knowing what I was doing.
You want to talk a little bit about speaking at graduation? That's kind of an opportunity that you're pretty humble with all of the things that you've done, but this is one of those things where it's pretty impressive, and I think you made a name for yourself, so people remember that. And then things just kind of happen. You want to share that story?
Yeah, that was really cool. It was probably like one of the coolest experiences I've had at OSU. I know, like, because every year they have one student do this, but I never thought, I'd be a student. I didn't even know that this was a thing that happened until the day I woke up and I checked my phone. So, yeah, I woke up, I checked my phone, I got an email. I checked it, it said that I was asked to confirm that I was interested in being the MC for the graduation celebration for, like, all of computer science, all of computer engineering, for, like, the EACS graduation. I was, like, obviously I was super excited. I thought, it was a really cool opportunity, but also, like, scared me half to death because of the stage fright and anxiety and everything. But I thought, there's no way I'd ever get an opportunity, maybe as large as this, at least in college. So I said yes. And the person who actually invited me to do that was my first year advisor, Jamie. And she's, you know, very, very kind woman. She's very nice. And, you know, I kept up to date with her on stuff, and she knew that I was an ACM officer. And she knew I was engaged in, you know, the community. I was active in helping students and everything along the lines of community. And because of that, she had remembered my name is what she told me. So she reached out and we had set that up. I was given like a few days to write a speech for it. So I had to write like an opening presentation that I could give in like 3 minutes. And then I had a closing. I ended up actually also finding out that I was going to give out the awards to like Faculty of the Year. And so I actually awarded her Faculty of the Year for the like advisors. Roger the Goat, I gave him an award.
Like you got to decide who the faculty?
No, I read out loud and I got to hand it
Okay.
to them. For anyone, you know, who knows Carson and I think Carson, AJ, and Colin, they went to the graduation celebration and recorded it. they got me shaking hands with Roger as I handed him his award. It was a really fun opportunity. And so, you know, I definitely think the most nerve-wracking part of it was talking in front of everyone, though, right? There's like over 1,000 people. And in those moments, like, you know, I didn't really know what to focus on. And I think what helped me a lot was like really thinking about like how everyone in an audience for a speaker, and this is like my trick to like public speaking, everyone in an audience for a speaker wants to see you succeed, right? Like, I don't know if anyone else, you know, has felt this, but you never want the speaker to do bad. You want them to succeed and do well and have a good talk. So I think from that perspective, coming in with a very positive mindset and understanding like everyone is supportive of you really helps, because I know that even if I'm, you know, stumbling or if I make a mistake along the way, it's not judged, you know, or at least even if it is, like, it's so quickly forgotten because you're continuously moving forward, so that they recognize that you're able to continue moving. I think that was a really good lesson that I learned then.
100%. Yeah. I think we'll call it with one last question. This is the question I've been asking everyone at the end. So, you know, as someone who's so integral to the CS community, you know, I want to get back to just that advice. You know, there's a lot of students who feel like they have to put in so much effort and do all these things. Maybe they don't know where they're going. What is the number one piece of advice that these students need that you think will help them get to maybe the place where you're at, or an even better place than you, and help them succeed as CS students?
Yeah. I think, you know, and I mean, at least for me, and this is like, I kind of have two things that I think about when it comes to this. Number one, and this is going to be kind of a cop-out answer, is it's about luck. And I say that only because I want everyone to know that there's at least some portion of luck at play when life happens, at least for you know, applications and stuff. It's about, you know, your resume coming into the application pool at the right time to the right person, at least in my experience, in my personal feelings. And I only say that just to be like, you know, aware that there is some element of randomness to it, so there's no guaranteed one answer. But if there was one thing that I think would really make every CS major a better CS major, is what I said at the beginning, and I'll reiterate this again because it's such a strong point to me. It's that if you are wanting to do well and enjoy what you're doing, you have to love it. And I think, like, you can't, I kind of talked about this on, like, the project side. You can't build a project excitedly if you don't like what you're building. You can't enjoy software engineering or being a computer science major if you don't like the computer science, if you don't like the coding part, if you don't like the problem solving. These are all things I think that go hand in hand. So be excited about learning new things. Be excited about applying these skills that you're learning, whether that's through projects or classwork. I mean, classwork is kind of hard to be sometimes excited about, but be excited about the opportunities you have. All of these things are going to make your life, better. You're going to be excited about your job and your future prospects. At least for me, what's helped me most when it comes to interviewing and putting in applications and looking at these jobs is thinking about how this is going to help other people in my life, how this is going to help my family. Because I can use this money to support my mom. I can use this money to help my sister with college, my stepbrother with college. These are all things that I think about that really drive me, but those are like extrinsic things, but it should be intrinsic as well. It should be things that you enjoy, and I think that can really make a difference in how you approach computer science and the amount of effort you need to put in to get internships.
That was a wonderful answer, Peter. I feel like CS community here and just OSU as a whole is really lucky to have you, not just as an officer, but as a friend. I love talking to you. Thank you for all your wise words, and I really had a great time on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So for everyone listening, that's going to be it for today. I think we'll switch this back. And thank you for listening to the Beaver Hacks podcast. Once again, we have a Google technical interview workshop from ACM happening on October 24th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. in Kelly 1003. And then for Hackathon Club, we're going to be having a hackathon project showcase on October 22nd in Link 303 from 6 to 7 p.m. And then, as always, Peter has his mock interviews. If you're looking for any help or any assistance in anything related to CS or trying to get that prep for interviews and get those internships, definitely hit Peter up. Check him out on Discord and check out their Instagram and all their socials. Thanks everyone.